You're worth nothing. You're a waste of my budget. Security will escort you out.
You're worth nothing. You're a waste of my budget. Marcus said it with a smile. That's what I remember most. Not the words themselves, but the casual way he delivered them, like he was commenting on the weather. We were in his corner office, all glass and chrome, overlooking the harbor. Behind him, sailboats drifted across gray water. I'd worked at Vane Capital for 6 years. 6 years of 14-hour days, of fixing his mistakes, of watching him take credit for my analysis. Security will escort you out, he added, already looking at his phone. I didn't argue. What would be the point? Marcus Vane always won. He was the golden child, the one who inherited our grandfather's CEO chair when he was barely 30. I was the family embarrassment, the grandson nobody wanted, raised by a single mother after my father died. They let me work there as a favor, Marcus reminded me often. A charity case with a famous last name. The security guard, Mike, who I'd chatted with 1,000 mornings, wouldn't meet my eyes as he walked me to my desk. I packed my things into a cardboard box, a coffee mug, a framed photo of my mom, a snow globe from a company trip I wasn't invited on. My coworkers pretended to be busy. Nobody said goodbye. Outside, the New England autumn bit through my jacket. I walked 3 blocks to my apartment with that box, feeling the weight of it, the pathetic sum of 6 years. My apartment was a studio above a dry cleaner, the kind of place where you could hear everything through the walls. I set the box on my kitchen counter, all 4 feet of it, and stared at the water-stained ceiling. That was Monday. By Friday, I'd sent out 47 resumes. By the following Monday, I'd received 47 rejections. Word travels fast in our industry, and Marcus had made sure everyone knew I was unreliable. That's the word he used, I learned later. Not incompetent, not unqualified, unreliable. It was genius, really. It suggested character flaws nobody could disprove. I was eating ramen for the 4th night in a row when someone knocked on my door. Package, a voice called. I wasn't expecting anything. I opened the door to find a delivery driver already heading down the stairs. On my doormat sat a wooden box, maybe 2 feet long and a foot wide, wrapped in brown paper and sealed with actual wax. Not the decorative kind you see on wedding invitations. This was thick, dark red wax, stamped with a seal I couldn't make out in the dim hallway light. I brought it inside, set it on my counter, and stared at it for a full minute. There was no return address, no shipping label even, just my name and address written in careful, old-fashioned handwriting on a card tied to the top. The wax cracked when I pried it open. Inside, packed in aged velvet, was a brass telescope eyepiece, ornate, heavy, clearly antique, and a folded document on thick paper that crackled when I touched it. The document was a property deed, written partially in what looked like Old English, dated 1923. It took me 20 minutes of squinting to parse the language, but the meaning became clear. I now owned a property, a cabin, the Vane family summer cabin, specifically, located 40 miles north in the woods near a town called Millbrook. I'd heard of it. Everyone in the family had. It was the subject of rumors and jokes at Thanksgiving dinners I wasn't invited to. The cursed cabin where my great-grandfather supposedly died. Where strange things happened. Where nobody went anymore. The deed was signed by my grandfather, dated 2 months before his death 3 years ago. Below his signature was a note in his handwriting. For Elliot, the only honest Vane. I picked up the telescope eyepiece again, turning it over in my hands. It was shaped wrong for a telescope. Too short, too wide at one end. The brass had a patina that suggested it was even older than the deed. I held it up to the light and noticed something. Tiny notches along the interior rim, like teeth. Not an eyepiece. A key. I sat back in my cheap folding chair and laughed. It was a bitter sound that echoed off my bare walls. Marcus had fired me for being worthless, and now I owned a haunted cabin in the woods. Perfect. Just perfect. But then I looked at the deed again. At my grandfather's note. He'd never been warm to me exactly, but he'd never been cruel either. He was the only one who seemed to notice I existed. When I was 12, he'd shown me his office at Vane Capital, let me sit in his chair, told me that numbers told stories if you knew how to read them. For Elliot, the only honest Vane, I grabbed my laptop and started searching. The cabin's property records were sparse. It had been built in 1921, updated in 1955, and then nothing. No sales, no transfers, no tax records after 1980. It existed in a legal gray area, apparently forgotten by the county assessor's office. But if my grandfather had deeded it to me 2 months before his death, and if he'd gone to the trouble of having this wooden box delivered exactly 2 weeks after I was fired, which meant someone had been holding it, waiting for this specific trigger, then maybe the cabin wasn't just a cabin. Maybe it was a message. I looked at the telescope key again. Sucks for Marcus, I said to my empty apartment. I collect scrap. The drive to Millbrook took 90 minutes through increasingly dense forest. My car, a 15-year-old sedan, held together by optimism and duct tape, rattled over potholes and frost heaves. The GPS lost signal 20 miles in, but the directions on the deed were surprisingly precise. Route 47 to Blackwood Trail, 3 miles to a fork, left at the lightning-struck oak, half a mile to a clearing. The lightning-struck oak was unmistakable, split down the middle and blackened by fire but still standing. Beyond it, the road became a suggestion, more mud than pavement. My sedan scraped bottom twice before I reached the clearing. The cabin sat in a depression surrounded by white pines, their branches blocking most of the afternoon light. It was larger than I'd expected, 2 stories with a wraparound porch and a stone chimney. But it looked like it had surrendered to time. The porch sagged. Shutters hung at angles. Moss covered the north-facing wall like a rash. I sat in my car for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled, and felt the isolation press against me. No cell signal, no other buildings visible, no sound except wind moving through the pines. This was the kind of place where people disappeared and nobody found them until spring. I grabbed a flashlight from my trunk and approached the front door. It was unlocked. The lock had rusted through decades ago. Inside, the air was thick with dust and something else, something organic and old. Sheet-covered furniture created ghost shapes in the dim light. A grandfather clock stood silent in the corner, its hands frozen at 3:07. I walked through the first floor, pulling sheets off furniture. A couch, a dining table, chairs that looked hand-carved. Everything was quality stuff, built to last. In the kitchen, dishes still sat in cabinets. In a bedroom off the main hall, a bed was made with blankets folded at perfect right angles. It looked like someone had walked out intending to return and simply never had. Upstairs, I found 3 more bedrooms and a study. The study made me pause. Unlike the rest of the cabin, this room felt used. Papers were scattered across a desk. Books lined the walls. A leather chair sat angled toward a window that overlooked the clearing. I sat in the chair, and that's when I saw it. The telescope. It stood in the corner, a beautiful brass piece mounted on a wooden tripod, pointed not out the window but across the room at the wall. I walked over and examined it. The eyepiece was missing, obviously. I was holding it in my jacket pocket. The telescope was aimed at a section of wall between 2 bookcases. I ran my hands over the wood paneling, pressing and prodding. Nothing. I stepped back, looking at the wall from different angles, and noticed something odd. The panels didn't line up quite right. There was a 1/4-inch gap that shouldn't exist. I took out the brass key and examined the wall again. There, hidden in the decorative molding between panels, was a small brass plate with a circular opening, the same diameter as the key. My heart was hammering now. I inserted the key and twisted. Something inside the wall clicked, deep and mechanical. The panel swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing a space about 3 feet wide and 4 feet deep. Inside was a leather portfolio, a metal document box, and a reel-to-reel tape recorder. I pulled everything out and spread it across the desk. The portfolio contained the document labeled Trust Indenture, dated 1955, updated 1988, with a final amendment dated 3 years ago, right before my grandfather died. It was dense legal language, the kind designed to put people to sleep, but I'd been an accountant long enough to parse it. My hands started shaking around page 4. The trust held 51% of Vane Capital, controlling interest in the company. It had been established by my great-grandfather, passed to my grandfather, and was now mine. According to the amendment, control passed not to the oldest male heir, as everyone assumed, but to the first Vane descendant, who was removed from active participation in the company's management structure. I'd been fired. I met the criteria. But there was more. The trust wasn't just shares. It included liability clauses, covenants, and restrictions. I paged through the document, my accounting brain automatically flagging irregularities. The trust's assets had been used as collateral multiple times. Recently, I opened the metal document box. Inside were financial statements, offshore account records, and printouts of wire transfers, hundreds of them. Millions of dollars moving through shell corporations, tax havens, and private accounts, all signed off by Marcus Vane. I sat back in the chair, the documents scattered across my lap. My cousin, the golden child, the family's chosen one, had been systematically looting the trust. He'd been using the assets as his personal piggy bank, covering his own debts, funding his lifestyle. The payments to offshore accounts started small 5 years ago and had grown exponentially. The most recent transfer was 3 weeks ago, $4 million to a Cayman Islands corporation. But the trust was in my name now, which meant I laughed. It came out half choked, half hysterical. Marcus had fired me to keep me away from the company, to keep me from asking questions. But by firing me, he'd triggered the exact clause my grandfather had designed. He'd handed me control of everything he'd been stealing. "You magnificent old bastard," I said to the empty cabin. The tape recorder sat on the desk, silent and patient. I threaded the reel and pressed play. My grandfather's voice filled the room, thin and crackling but unmistakable. "Elliot, if you're hearing this, then Marcus has revealed himself. I've known for years what he is, what he's been doing. I built this trap carefully. The trust's structure ensures that the more he steals, the more liability he accrues. Every fraudulent transfer is documented. Every shell corporation is traceable. I've created a complete forensic trail, and I've made you the beneficiary not as a reward, but as a weapon." The recording continued for 20 minutes. My grandfather explained everything, how Marcus had approached him years ago with an investment scheme, how he'd discovered it was fraud, how he'd quietly restructured the trust to catch Marcus in the act. He'd been dying, cancer, and he'd decided to use his final months to build a trap that would only spring after his death, when he couldn't be pressured or threatened. "Marcus will never see you coming," the recording concluded. "He's too arrogant. He thinks you're weak. Use that, but be careful. He has powerful friends, and he won't go down easily. I've left you the tools. What you do with them is your choice. But know this, you're the only one I trusted to do what's right, the only honest Vane." The tape ended with a click. I sat in the study as shadows lengthened across the floor, holding 51% of Vane capital in my hands and evidence of fraud that would destroy Marcus forever. My cousin had called me worthless. He'd fired me, humiliated me, tried to erase me. He'd given me the key to his kingdom without even knowing it. I gathered the documents, packed them carefully in the portfolio, and headed for the door. But as I reached my car, I heard an engine. A black SUV was coming up the trail, moving fast. I barely had time to hide the portfolio under my seat before the SUV slid to a stop, blocking my car. 2 men got out. One was large, built like a linebacker, wearing a suit that didn't quite hide the bulge of a shoulder holster. The other was tall, thin, older, with silver hair and the kind of face you saw in courtrooms. "Elliot Vane," the older man said. It wasn't a question. "I'm Wallace Thorne. I represent Vane Capital's legal interests. We need to talk about the property you're on." "It's my property," I said. "I have the deed." "That deed is under dispute," Thorne said smoothly. "There are questions about its validity. Questions about whether your grandfather was of sound mind when he executed certain documents. Questions that can be resolved quickly and quietly if you're reasonable." The large man moved to my left, casual but deliberate, boxing me in. "I'm not interested in being reasonable," I said. Thorne's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then let me be clear. You're involving yourself in matters you don't understand, matters that could become very complicated for you. I'm offering you a way out. Take it. Or what? Or we'll have to pursue other options." The large man was close enough now that I could smell his cologne. My pulse hammered in my ears, but I forced myself to stay calm. If they knew I had the trust documents, if they knew what I'd found, they wouldn't be threatening. They'd be negotiating, which meant they didn't know. They were fishing. Tell Marcus I said hello, I replied. Tell him I'll be in touch. I got in my car before Thorne could respond. The large man didn't move, forcing me to edge around him, my bumper nearly touching his knees. He held his ground until the last second, then stepped aside with a smile that promised consequences. I drove away slowly, watching them in my rearview mirror. They didn't follow. They didn't need to. They'd delivered their message. But so had I. I didn't go home. Home wasn't safe anymore. If Thorne's people knew about the cabin, they knew where I lived. Instead, I drove to the one person who might help me understand what I'd found. Clara Dennison lived in a cottage on the edge of town, the kind of place with flower boxes on the windows and a cat sleeping on the porch. She'd been my grandfather's secretary for 30 years before retiring, and she'd sent me a card when he died. It was the only acknowledgement from anyone connected to the family that I existed. I knocked on her door at dusk. When she opened it, she looked exactly as I remembered. Small, white-haired, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Elliot," she said, "I wondered when you'd come. You knew? Your grandfather told me everything." She stepped aside. "Come in. We don't have much time." Her living room was tidy and warm, filled with books and photographs. She poured tea with steady hands while I sat on her couch, the portfolio on my lap like a bomb. "He spent his last year building the trap," Clara said, sitting across from me. "He found out about Marcus's fraud by accident, a misfiled report that crossed his desk. At first, he didn't want to believe it. Marcus was family. But the evidence was overwhelming. So he did what your grandfather always did. He built a system." "The trust," I said. "The trust was brilliant. Marcus thought he was untouchable because he believed he'd inherit control eventually. He didn't know about the amendment. Your grandfather changed the succession rules without telling anyone." "Why me?" Clara smiled. "Because you were the only one who never asked him for anything. The only one who worked without expecting rewards. He saw that. He valued it." I opened the portfolio and showed her the documents. She nodded, familiar with them. "There's more," she said. "Your grandfather maintained a separate archive, a complete forensic accounting of everything Marcus did. It's stored in a digital vault offshore, beyond anyone's reach. You'll need access codes." She handed me a piece of paper with a series of numbers and letters. "This gets you into the vault. Inside, you'll find recordings of phone calls, email archives, transaction records, everything needed to put Marcus in prison." "How did he—" "Your grandfather was dying. He had nothing to lose and months to work. He hired investigators. He used old contacts. He was thorough." I stared at the access codes. Why not go to the authorities himself? He tried. Marcus has friends in the DA's office, connections at the state level. Every attempt to investigate was quietly shut down. Your grandfather realized that justice wouldn't come from the system. It would have to come from family, from me, from you, Clara agreed. "But be careful. Marcus knows something is wrong. He doesn't know what you have, but he knows the timeline. The trust's quarterly review is in 2 weeks. When the succession is filed officially, he'll realize he's lost control. Between now and then, he'll be desperate." As if to punctuate her warning, my phone buzzed. A notification from my bank. Account frozen pending legal review. Then another. Credit cards canceled. Then another. A fraud alert on my identity. I looked at Clara. "He's already started." "Then you need to move faster." She gave me a laptop, old but functional, and watched as I logged into the vault using the access codes. The screen filled with folders, shell companies, wire transfers, phone recordings, email archives, gigabytes of evidence, all organized with my grandfather's meticulous attention to detail. I started downloading files, but the connection was slow. Clara's rural internet could barely handle the load. "How long?" she asked. "Hours, maybe longer." "You can't stay here. If they tracked you to the cabin, they'll find you here too." She was right. I needed a secure location, somewhere I could finish the download and analyze the evidence without interruption. But where? Every option felt exposed. Then I remembered. The college library. Open 24 hours during finals week. Anonymous computers, high-speed internet. I'd spent enough late nights there as a student that I knew the building's layout by heart. "I'll go to Millbrook College," I said. "Can you hold on to this?" I handed her the physical documents. "No," Clara said firmly. "Take them. Make copies, but take the originals. They're your insurance." I packed the portfolio into a backpack Clara provided. She gave me cash, $200, and a burner phone. "When this is over," she said at her door, "come back and tell me about it." "You know I will." I was halfway to my car when I saw the SUV parked 2 houses down, its engine off, but its shape unmistakable in the streetlight. I froze. How long had it been there? Had they seen me arrive? I got in my car and drove away normally, watching the SUV in my mirror. Didn't move. But as I turned onto the main road, a different vehicle, a dark sedan, pulled out behind me. They were following me. I took surface streets toward the college, keeping my speed normal, my turns predictable. The sedan stayed 3 cars back, professional and patient. They weren't trying to catch me. They were tracking me, probably hoping I'd lead them to wherever I'd hidden the trust documents. Good. Let them think I was running scared. I parked in the college's main lot and walked quickly toward the library, my backpack heavy with evidence. The sedan parked in a visitor spot. Through the library's glass doors, I saw a man get out, the large man from the cabin, the one with the shoulder holster. The library was busy with students cramming for exams. I moved through the ground floor quickly, then up the stairs to the 3rd floor where the computer lab was located. I chose a workstation in the corner with a view of the stairwell and logged in using a guest account. The download resumed. 60% complete. Then 65. The large man appeared at the top of the stairs, scanning the room. He saw me and his eyes locked onto my backpack. He started walking toward me, his hand moving toward his jacket. I grabbed the laptop and ran. Not toward the stairs, that's what he'd expect. Instead, I went deeper into the stacks, into the library's maze of shelves and study carrels. Behind me, I heard him start to follow, his footsteps heavy on the industrial carpet. The library's 3rd floor connected to the science building through a sky bridge. I sprinted across it, the laptop clutched to my chest, the download still running. 80%, 85. I burst into the science building and took the stairs down 2 at a time. Behind me, the large man was closing the distance, his breath coming in heavy gasps. I could hear him on the stairs getting closer. The ground floor exit led to a service road. I ran out into the cold night air looking for options. A delivery truck was parked 30 feet away, its engine running while the driver unloaded boxes. Without thinking, I ran to the far side and crouched behind the wheels. The large man emerged from the building, looking left and right. He pulled out his phone, speaking quickly. More help was coming. The download hit 95%, 98. The truck driver finished unloading and climbed back into the cab. The engine revved. I had maybe 3 seconds to decide. 100%. Download complete. I yanked the USB drive from the laptop and dropped the computer in a recycling bin. Then I ran back toward the main campus, away from the truck, away from the large man who was now searching behind the building. I made it to the student center, blended into a crowd of students, and walked out the far exit. No one followed. I circled back to my car through a different parking lot, half expecting to find it disabled or surrounded. It was untouched. I got in, locked the doors, and sat there for a moment, my hands shaking, the USB drive pressed against my palm like a talisman. I had it, everything my grandfather had compiled, every piece of evidence needed to destroy Marcus. But I also had a target on my back, and Marcus knew I was coming. I spent that night in my car in a Walmart parking lot, the seat reclined, the USB drive tucked in my sock. Every hour I woke to check my surroundings, half expecting to see Thorne's people circling. But the parking lot remained unchanged. Late-night shoppers, truckers catching sleep, the fluorescent glare of streetlights. At dawn, I bought a prepaid laptop at the store and found a coffee shop with reliable Wi-Fi. The evidence was worse than I'd imagined. My grandfather had documented 5 years of systematic fraud. Shell corporations in Delaware and the Caymans, fake consulting contracts, wire transfers timed to avoid scrutiny. Marcus had stolen over $12 million from the trust. But the recordings were the real weapon. I plugged in headphones and listened to Marcus's phone calls. Most were mundane. Business negotiations, dinner reservations, calls to his tailor. But scattered among them were conversations with Wallace Thorne that revealed the full scope of their conspiracy. The old man is dying, Marcus said in one recording dated 2 years ago. Another 6 months, maybe less. Once he's gone, I'll have complete control. The trust is just paper. We can restructure it however we want. What about Elliot? Thorne asked. What about him? He's nothing. A charity case we keep around because of the family name. I'll fire him eventually and keep him far away from anything that matters. There was more. Conversations about manipulating quarterly reports, about bribing auditors, about using trust assets as collateral for Marx's personal investments that had gone bad. They discussed everything with the casual arrogance of men who believed they were untouchable. In one recording, Marcus talked about his sailboat, a 40-foot racing yacht called Arrogance, that he'd commissioned for $2 million. He'd used trust money to buy it, disguising the purchase as a corporate entertainment expense. It's the perfect symbol, Marcus said. Everyone sees me on that boat and knows I've made it, that I'm somebody. His ego lived in that boat. I made notes, building a timeline, cross-referencing the recordings with financial documents. The picture that emerged was damning, but it was also complex. Bringing this to the authorities would take time, months of investigation, depositions, legal maneuvering. Marcus had resources. He'd fight. He'd drag it out. And I didn't have months. The trust's quarterly review was in 9 days. When the paperwork was filed showing the succession to me, Marcus would know. He'd destroy whatever evidence he could, intimidate witnesses, use his connections to muddy the investigation. I needed to move faster. I needed to hit him where he couldn't defend, publicly, decisively, in a way that made recovery impossible. I pulled up Marcus's social media. He posted constantly. Photos from charity galas, business awards, sailing races. His next event was in 6 days. The annual Vane Capital Gala, a black tie fundraiser held at the Harbor Club. 500 people, press coverage, the mayor, 2 senators. Marcus was receiving the Entrepreneur of the Year award. It was perfect. I called Clara using the burner phone. I need your help with something unusual. How unusual? Do you still have connections at the county clerk's office? Maybe. What do you need? The trust documents need to be filed officially, immediately. Not in 9 days. Tomorrow. There was a pause. That will accelerate everything. Marcus will know. Good. I want him to know. I want him panicked. What are you planning? Something my grandfather would appreciate. She was quiet for a moment, then, I'll make the calls, but Elliot, be careful. Desperate men do desperate things. She was right to worry. That afternoon, my apartment was broken into. I wasn't there. I'd been sleeping in my car, but the landlord called. Someone had picked the lock, tossed the place, and left. Nothing was taken because there was nothing to take. But the message was clear. Then the smear campaign started. A blog post appeared, former Vane Capital employee under investigation for embezzlement. It was complete fiction, but it cited anonymous sources and looked professional. By evening, it had been picked up by local business sites. By morning, it was on social media. My phone, my real phone, not the burner, buzzed constantly with messages from former colleagues asking if it was true. I didn't respond. There was no point. Marcus controlled the narrative. But in 2 days, I'd control his world. I spent the next 48 hours preparing. I made copies of everything, 5 complete sets, stored in different locations. I hired a criminal defense attorney with cash and gave her a sealed envelope to be opened if anything happened to me. I wrote a detailed timeline and sent it to 3 different journalists with instructions to publish if I didn't check in by a certain date. Then I did something my grandfather's evidence had made possible. I accessed the trust's corporate accounts. As the controlling interest holder, I had legal authority over the trust's assets. I couldn't steal from them. That would make me no better than Marcus. But I could freeze them. I could prevent Marcus from moving money, from hiding evidence, from liquidating assets before the authorities arrived. I executed a corporate lockdown, freezing every account associated with the trust. It would take Marcus's lawyers days to untangle it, and by then it wouldn't matter. My phone rang. Not the burner, my real phone. Marcus. I answered. What the fuck do you think you're doing? His voice was tight with rage. Collecting what's mine. You have no idea what you've stepped into. No idea who you're dealing with. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A thief, a fraud, a man who stole from his own family. Everything I did was for the company. For the family. You're too small-minded to understand. I understand that you called me worthless. That you used trust assets to buy a yacht. That you spent years looting what our grandfather built. Silence, then. What do you want? Nothing you can give me. Everyone has a price, Elliot. Name yours. I don't want money, Marcus. I want you to lose everything. I want you to feel what I felt when you fired me, when you humiliated me, when you erased me. You're making a mistake. No, I said. You made the mistake 2 weeks ago when you fired me. You triggered the trust's succession clause. Everything you stole, it's mine now. The company, mine. Your debts, mine. And I'm calling them all due. I hung up. My hands were shaking. I declared war. There was no going back. The next morning, Clara called. It's done. The trust documents are filed. The succession is official. You're now the controlling shareholder of Vane Capital. Did Marcus get the notification? About 20 minutes ago, yes. I imagine he's having an interesting morning. That was an understatement. By noon, Vane Capital's stock had dropped 15% on rumors of a hostile takeover. By close of business, Marcus had called an emergency board meeting. By evening, the company's lawyers were filing injunctions trying to block the trust's succession. None of it would work. My grandfather had built the legal structure too carefully, but Marcus would try anyway. He'd fight until the last possible moment. I had 3 days until the gala. Wallace Thorne called on day 2. We should meet, he said. No pleasantries, no threats, just exhaustion in his voice. Why? Because you've won. Marcus doesn't know it yet, but you've won, and I'd like to discuss the terms of surrender. I'm not interested in terms. You should be. Marcus is finished, but the company doesn't have to be. There are employees, shareholders, clients, innocent people who will be hurt if this becomes a public spectacle. He was good. The reasonable voice, the appeal to my better nature. But I'd heard him on the recordings. I knew what he was. Where? I asked. My office, tomorrow, noon, just you and me. No. Then where? I thought about it. Somewhere public, somewhere Marcus's people couldn't control. The Harbor Club, the restaurant, 1 o'clock. Fine, come alone. I'll bring whoever I want. I hung up before he could respond. I called Clara. Remember when you said you had connections at the DA's office? Some, yes. I need you to make an introduction. Tomorrow, before 1 o'clock. The meeting location was deliberate. The Harbor Club sat on a pier overlooking the water where Marcus moored Arrogance. I wanted Thorne to see it through the windows. I wanted him to understand what was coming. I arrived early and chose a table with a perfect view. The yacht was there, gleaming white and chrome, with Marcus's name painted on the stern in letters 2 feet high. It was obscene, really. A monument to ego purchased with stolen money. Thorne arrived exactly at 1, alone, carrying a leather briefcase. He sat across from me and placed the briefcase on the table between us. Before we begin, he said, I want you to know that I'm here without Marcus's knowledge. What I'm about to offer you is my own initiative. I'm listening. Marcus will resign as CEO. He'll transfer all his personal shares to you. He'll make a public statement taking responsibility for mismanagement. In exchange, you don't file criminal charges. You don't go to the press. You let him walk away with his reputation damaged but not destroyed. No. You haven't heard the numbers yet. He opened the briefcase. Inside were documents, sale agreements, settlement offers, non-disclosure agreements. He walked me through them. Marcus would give up everything, his salary, his shares, his seat on the board. I'd get complete control of Vane Capital and $10 million in cash as a settlement. 10 million, Thorne repeated. Tax-free, immediate. All you have to do is sign and walk away. I looked at the documents, then at Thorne. You're offering me $10 million of embezzled trust money to cover up the fact that Marcus embezzled trust money. I'm offering you a clean resolution. What about the yacht? I gestured toward the window, toward Arrogance floating serenely at its mooring. Thorne glanced at the boat, then back at me. What about it? It was purchased with trust funds, fraudulently, which means, legally, it's not Marcus's. It's mine. For the first time, Thorne looked uncertain. The boat? Everything purchased with trust assets belongs to the trust. I've had 3 lawyers confirm it. The boat, Marcus's vacation house in Florida, his art collection, all of it bought with money he stole. All of it now mine. Elliot, be reasonable. I'm being perfectly reasonable. Marcus committed fraud. The penalty for fraud is forfeiture of ill-gotten assets. It's basic law. Thorne's face hardened. If you pursue this path, Marcus will fight. He'll drag it out for years. He'll destroy the company rather than give you the satisfaction. Then he'll destroy himself too. You're willing to accept that? I'm counting on it. Thorne stood. You're making a mistake. You could walk away rich. Instead, you're choosing revenge. Not revenge, I said. Justice. He left without another word, taking his briefcase and his settlement offer. Through the window, I watched him walk along the pier, pause at Arrogance, and pull out his phone. Making a call. Warning Marcus, probably. Good. I wanted Marcus to know. I wanted him to spend the next 2 days in fear. My phone buzzed. The burner, Clara. I spoke to the DA's office. They're interested, but they need more than recordings. They need witnesses, documents, ironclad evidence. I have it. Can you prove Marcus knew the transfers were fraudulent? That he intended to steal, not just mismanaged? I thought about the recordings, about Marcus's casual discussions of fraud, about the shell corporations and fake contracts. Yes, then they'll move. But Elliot, they need time. A case like this takes months to build. They can build it after the gala. What are you planning? To give them probable cause. I hung up and looked out at Arrogance. The boat was Marcus's pride, his symbol. Everyone in our industry knew it. He'd competed in races, won trophies, hosted parties for clients and politicians. It was his identity. And it was mine now. I made 2 calls. The first was to a marine lawyer who specialized in asset seizures. The second was to the harbor master, who confirmed what I needed to know. The gala's venue was 200 feet from where Arrogance was moored. Then I called Marcus. What? His voice was raw, like he'd been shouting. I'm giving you a chance, I said. Tomorrow night, the gala. You're receiving your award. Take the microphone and tell the truth. Tell everyone what you did. Admit the fraud. Resign. Apologize. You're insane. I'm generous. You do that, and I'll settle for having you removed from the company. No. No criminal charges, no press. Just go away quietly. And if I don't, then I'll destroy you in front of everyone you've ever tried to impress. He laughed. It was an ugly sound. You have nothing. Your grandfather's paranoid recordings, inadmissible. His documents, my lawyers will tear them apart. You're bluffing. Come to the gala and find out. I hung up. That night, I didn't sleep. I went over the plan again and again, looking for flaws, for things that could go wrong. There were a dozen ways it could fail. But if it worked, if everything aligned, Marcus would lose everything in a single night. At dawn, I drove to the Harbor Club to inspect the venue. The gala setup was already underway. Round tables being arranged, a stage being built, lighting rigs being installed. The event planner, a harried woman with a clipboard, barely noticed me. Are you at the band? She asked. Sound crew, I lied. Thank God. The speaker system needs to be tested. We're projecting audio across the pier for the dinner portion. The client insisted people on the boats could hear the speeches. Perfect. Marcus's ego had created the perfect weapon. I spent the day finalizing details. The marine lawyer filed the asset seizure paperwork. The harbor master confirmed the timeline. Clara arranged for the DA's representative to attend the gala as a guest. Everything was in place. At 6 o'clock, I put on the only suit I owned, purchased for job interviews I'd never gotten, and drove to the Harbor Club. The parking lot was already filling with luxury cars. Women in evening gowns, men in tuxedos, everyone who was anyone in our city's business community. I watched them arrive. The mayor, the senators, the CEOs, the lawyers and accountants and power brokers. Marcus's world. The world he'd built through theft and fraud. The world that was about to learn the truth. I stayed in my car until 7:30, then walked to the pier. The gala was in full swing, music and laughter drifting across the water. I didn't go in. I wasn't invited. Instead, I walked along the pier toward Arrogance. The yacht sat pristine in its slip, lit by deck lights that made it glow against the dark water. Security was light. A single guard at the pier's entrance who was more concerned with the gala guests than with someone walking along the public dock. I'd spent hours studying Arrogance's specifications online. 42 feet, custom built, state-of-the-art sound system, installed for entertaining clients. Marcus had bragged about it in an interview. You can hear the music half a mile away. It's like bringing a nightclub onto the water. That sound system was my weapon. I climbed aboard. The cabin was unlocked. Marcus's arrogance again, assuming no one would dare touch his property. Inside, the boat was exactly as excessive as I'd imagined. Leather seating, a full bar, a captain's chair that looked like a throne. The sound system's control panel was in the cabin, labeled clearly. I connected my phone via Bluetooth and tested the volume. The speakers came alive, and I quickly muted them. Too early, not yet. I checked the time, 8:15. Marcus was scheduled to receive his award at 9. I climbed back on deck and looked toward the harbor club. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the gala in progress, hundreds of people at their tables. A stage at the far end where a podium stood waiting. And there at the head table was Marcus. He looked perfect. Tuxedo tailored precisely, hairstyled, smiling and laughing with the mayor, playing the role he'd perfected. The successful entrepreneur, the beloved CEO, the man who had everything. My phone buzzed. Clara. The DA's representative is inside. She's recording everything. Good. Elliot, there are a lot of ways this could go wrong. I know. Are you sure? I looked at arrogance, at the boat purchased with stolen money, at the floating monument to Marcus's ego. I'm sure. At 8:30, the speeches began. I watched through the windows as the Harbor Club's president welcomed everyone. Then the mayor spoke about economic development. Then a senator discussed small businesses. The standard political fare, building toward the main event. At 8:50, the MC, some local news anchor, took the podium. And now, Shinintayasho, he announced, the moment we've all been waiting for. It's my honor to present the Entrepreneur of the Year award to a man who exemplifies everything we value in our business community: innovation, integrity, and dedication to excellence. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus Vane. The room erupted in applause. Marcus stood, buttoning his tuxedo jacket, acknowledging the ovation with practiced humility. He walked to the stage, shook hands with the mayor and the senator, and accepted a crystal trophy. He stepped to the microphone. Thank you, he began. This is truly an honor. When I took over Vane Capital from my grandfather, I made a promise to uphold his legacy of integrity and innovation. I pressed play on my phone. The speakers on arrogance came alive at full volume, carrying Marcus's voice. Not the one currently speaking, but the one from the recordings. The old man is dying. Another 6 months, maybe less. Once he's gone, I'll have complete control. The trust is just paper. We can restructure it however we want. The sound blasted across the pier, across the water, through the open doors of the harbor club. Every head turned. The applause died. Marcus froze mid-sentence, his face draining of color. Wallace Thorne's recorded voice responded, "What about the financial irregularities, the offshore accounts? Who's going to question them? I control the audits. I control the board. And if anyone does ask questions, I'll just fire them. Like I did with Elliot. He's nothing. A waste of budget." The Harbor Club was silent now. 500 people listening to Marcus's voice describe embezzlement, fraud, and contempt for the very company he claimed to serve. I played the next recording. Marcus laughing with Thorne about using trust assets for personal purchases. The boat alone, that was $2 million. Put it down as entertainment expense. No one checks those. On stage, Marcus was looking around wildly, trying to locate the source of the sound. Someone pointed toward the pier, toward arrogance. Marcus saw me standing on the deck, my phone in my hand, backlit by the yacht's lights. Our eyes met across 200 feet of water. "What about Elliot?" Thorne's voice asked through the speakers. "What about him? He's nothing. A charity case we keep around because of the family name. I'll fire him eventually. Keep him far away from anything that matters." The recording continued. 5 years of fraud distilled into 5 minutes of damning confessions. Marcus discussing shell corporations. Marcus approving fraudulent contracts. Marcus laughing about manipulating auditors. The final recording was the worst. Marcus on the phone with a business associate, mocking a sick relative who'd needed money for medical care. My cousin called crying about hospital bills. Can you believe it? Like I'm a charity. I told him the family doesn't do handouts anymore. The gala guests were on their feet now, some moving toward the exits, others pulling out phones. The mayor had stepped away from the stage. The senators were conferring urgently with their aides. Marcus just stood there, his trophy in his hands, his world collapsing around him. I pressed stop. The silence that followed was absolute. Then the flashing lights appeared. 3 police cars and 2 unmarked sedans pulled into the Harbor Club's parking lot. The DA's representative had heard enough. Officers moved through the gala toward the stage, but I wasn't done. I made one more call to the marine lawyer. Execute the seizure, I said. Within minutes, a Coast Guard vessel approached Arrogance. An officer boarded and handed me papers. A court order authorizing the immediate seizure of the yacht as an asset purchased through fraudulent means. Through the Harbor Club's windows, I saw officers reaching the stage. Marcus was arguing, gesturing, but his lawyer, Thorne, was nowhere to be seen. Someone from the DA's office was reading Marcus his Miranda rights. The Coast Guard officer started the yacht's engines. "We're moving her to impound," he said. "You'll want to disembark." I stepped onto the pier and watched as Arrogance, Marcus's pride, his symbol, his ego, was towed away from its moorings. The yacht that had hosted senators and CEOs, that had been featured in magazines, that had been Marcus's floating throne, was now evidence in a criminal investigation. The gala was breaking up. Guests streaming out, phones to their ears, scandal unfolding in real time. Police escorted Marcus through the crowd. He was still holding his trophy. As they reached the parking lot, Marcus saw me standing on the pier. The police paused, and for a moment we just looked at each other across the chaos he'd created. Then Marcus dropped the trophy. It shattered on the pavement, crystal exploding into 1,000 pieces, and he lunged toward me. The police caught him, but not before he screamed, "You're nothing! You're still nothing! This changes nothing!" But it changed everything, and we both knew it. They put him in a patrol car. The door closed, the lights flashed, and Marcus Vane, CEO, entrepreneur, thief, was driven away into the night. I stood on the pier as the crowd dispersed, as the gala's music finally stopped, as the lights dimmed. Claire appeared beside me, her hand on my arm. "Your grandfather would be proud," she said. "I'm not sure pride is what I want." "What do you want?" I watched Arrogance disappear around the harbor's bend, towed toward its new life as evidence. I wanted him to feel what I felt, to lose everything, to be nothing. And now I need to figure out what comes next. Claire smiled. "You're the controlling shareholder of a major investment firm. You have options." I never wanted the company. Then sell it, or fix it, or burn it down and start over. But Elliot, you're not nothing anymore. You never were. She left me there, alone on the pier, with the weight of 51% of Vane capital, and the satisfaction of knowing Marcus would wake up tomorrow in a cell facing federal fraud charges. My phone rang. The DA's office. "Mr. Vane, we'll need you to come in tomorrow morning. We have questions about the trust, about the recordings, about your grandfather's investigation." "I'll be there." "And Mr. Vane, thank you. Cases like they don't usually come wrapped up this neatly." I hung up and looked at the Harbor Club. Workers were already breaking down the stage where Marcus had stood just an hour ago. Within days, everyone would forget the gala had ever happened, but they'd never forget what they'd heard. I walked back to my car, parked in the cheap overflow lot a quarter-mile away. As I drove home to my studio apartment above the dry cleaner, I realized something. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. The story broke by morning. Every news outlet carried it. Local CEO arrested on fraud charges. Vane Capital embroiled in embezzlement scandal. Recordings reveal years of corporate theft. They got most of the details right. Marcus's arrest. The trust's succession to me. The seized yacht. What they missed was the human story underneath. The years of dismissal. The calculated revenge. The trap my grandfather had built. I spent the next 3 days giving statements to the DA's office. They were thorough, professional, and frankly amazed at the evidence my grandfather had compiled. "We've never seen anything like it," the lead prosecutor said. "It's like he built a complete case file and just handed it to us. The recordings alone are enough to convict, but the financial documentation, the forensic accounting, it's prosecutorial gold." "He had time," I said, "and motivation. Still, this level of detail, most people wouldn't know where to start. He spent 40 years building companies. He knew how to document everything." The prosecutor leaned back in her chair. "Marcus's lawyers are already discussing a plea deal. They know they can't win at trial. We're looking at significant prison time, 8 to 12 years probably. Good. There's something else you should know. Wallace Thorne has retained his own counsel. He's claiming he was just following his client's instructions, that he didn't know the full extent of the fraud. That's a lie. We know. We have him on the recordings, too. He'll face charges as well, though probably lesser ones. Conspiracy, maybe. Obstruction. I left the DA's office feeling hollow. Justice was happening, but it was slow, bureaucratic, anticlimactic after the drama of the gala. Marcus was in custody, released on $1 million bond his family had somehow scraped together. He was probably sitting in his house right now, meeting with lawyers, planning appeals, but his world was still gone. Vane Capital's stock had plummeted. Clients were withdrawing funds. The board had called an emergency meeting to discuss restructuring, and I owned 51% of a sinking ship. Claire called that afternoon. Have you thought about what you're going to do with the company? Burn it down, I said. Isn't that what you said I could do? I said it was an option, not necessarily a good one. Why not? Marcus poisoned it. His fraud, his reputation, it's all connected to Vane Capital. Maybe the best thing is to liquidate and be done with it. And the employees? The people who had nothing to do with Marcus's crimes? I hadn't thought about them. The accountants, the analysts, the administrative staff. People like I'd been. People just trying to do their jobs. How many? I asked. 47 at last count. Most of them worked under Marcus, but they were never part of his schemes. Their collateral damage. 47 people whose livelihoods depended on decisions I'd make. 47 people who'd lose their jobs if I shut everything down. I need to think, I said. That night, I drove back to the cabin. I needed space, distance from the city and its demands. The drive felt different this time, not oppressive, but clarifying. The isolation wasn't a threat anymore. It was sanctuary. Inside the cabin still smelled of dust and age, but it felt less abandoned. I climbed the stairs to the study and sat in my grandfather's chair. The hidden compartment was empty now. I'd removed everything, but I could still feel his presence in the room. On the desk was a stack of papers I'd missed before, old letters mostly. Correspondence between my grandfather and business associates. I read through them looking for, I wasn't sure what. Guidance, maybe? Some indication of what he'd intended. One letter stood out. It was addressed to my grandfather, from someone named Thomas Brennan, dated 6 months before my grandfather died. Richard, it read, I understand your concerns about Marcus and I respect your decision to restructure the trust, but I'm troubled by the implications. Vane Capital has been in your family for 3 generations. Are you really willing to see it destroyed to punish one man? Consider instead whether there's someone who could rebuild it, someone who understands its value but hasn't been corrupted by its power, someone who could make it what it was always meant to be. At the bottom, my grandfather had written in pen, EV. If you're reading this, you've already won. The question is what you do with victory. Destroy or build? The choice is yours. But remember, Vane Capital was never about Marcus. It was about what it could be, what it should be, what you could make it. I sat back, the letter in my hands, and finally understood what my grandfather had done. He hadn't just given me revenge, he'd given me responsibility. The trust wasn't punishment, not entirely. It was opportunity. A chance to take something broken and fix it, to prove I was more than the cousin nobody wanted, to build something worthy of the Vane name. I called Clara. I need a meeting with the board, I said. All of them. Tomorrow. They're not going to be happy to see you. They don't have to be happy. They just have to listen. The board meeting was held in Vane Capital's conference room, the same room where I'd been fired 3 weeks earlier. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. 9 board members sat around the table, all of them older than me, all of them associates of Marcus. They looked at me with varying degrees of hostility and fear. I stood at the head of the table and began. I'm not going to pretend you like me. I'm not going to pretend I like most of you. But we have a situation. Vane Capital is dying. Client withdrawals are accelerating. Stock price is in free fall. Within 6 months, maybe less, this company will be insolvent. And whose fault is that? One board member asked. You're the one who destroyed Marcus publicly. You're the one who brought the scandal. Marcus destroyed himself. I just made sure everyone knew about it. So what do you want? To gloat? No, I want to offer you a choice. I pulled out a document I'd prepared with Clara's help. I'm proposing a complete restructuring, new leadership, new management, full transparency with clients and regulators. We acknowledge Marcus's fraud publicly, compensate anyone harmed, and rebuild from the ground up. That will cost millions. I know, the trust can cover it. Why would you do that? You could liquidate, take your share, and walk away rich. Because 47 people work here who did nothing wrong. Because Vane Capital was supposed to mean something before Marcus corrupted it. And because my grandfather spent his last year building a trap not just to catch Marcus, but to save the company. The room was silent. So here's the choice, I continued. You can fight me. You can protect Marcus's legacy, minimize the damage, and watch this company die slowly. Or you can work with me. We clean house, we rebuild, and we make Vane Capital into something worth saving. And if we say no, then I use my controlling interest to force you out and do it anyway. But I'd prefer cooperation. One board member, an older woman named Patricia, who'd worked with my grandfather, spoke up. What kind of restructuring are we talking about? New CEO, not me. I don't want the job. Someone from outside, someone with no connection to Marcus. Full audit of all accounts and transactions, restitution fund for anyone harmed by the fraud, and a new company charter that prevents any single person from having the kind of unchecked power Marcus had. That's radical. It's necessary. Patricia looked at the other board members. I vote yes, this company meant something once. It could again. Slowly, reluctantly, the others agreed. Not because they liked me, not because they wanted change, but because they saw the alternative. Over the next 3 months, we rebuilt. I hired a CEO with a sterling reputation, someone from outside our industry who brought credibility and a fresh perspective. We commissioned an independent audit that revealed the full extent of Marcus's fraud, worse than we'd thought, but not catastrophic. We created a compensation fund for affected clients. And slowly, painfully, we started to recover. Marcus's trial was set for spring. His lawyers filed motion after motion, trying to suppress evidence, dismiss charges, delay proceedings. But the recordings were damning, and the forensic accounting was ironclad. Even the best legal team couldn't fight that. I didn't attend the preliminary hearings. I didn't need to. The DA kept me updated, and the press covered everything obsessively. Fallen CEO faces justice. Vane Heir's testimony devastates defense. Prosecution presents overwhelming evidence of fraud. Wallace Thorne took a plea deal. 3 years for conspiracy and obstruction. He'd be disbarred, his career finished. He'd testify against Marcus in exchange for leniency. Marcus refused to plea. Even facing overwhelming evidence, even with his lawyers advising him to cut a deal, he insisted on trial. His arrogance wouldn't let him admit defeat. He thinks he can charm a jury, the prosecutor told me. He thinks his reputation still means something. Does it? She smiled grimly. Not after we play those recordings in open court. The trial began on a cold March morning. I sat in the gallery, anonymous among the crowd of reporters and spectators. Marcus entered in a suit that probably cost more than my car, his head high, playing the role of the wrongly accused. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. Financial records, expert testimony. Forensic accountants explaining shell corporations and wire transfers. It was thorough, professional, and devastating. Then they played the recordings. Marcus's voice filled the courtroom, describing fraud with casual arrogance. The jury, 12 ordinary people who'd never stolen anything more than office supplies, listened with growing disgust. By the third recording, 2 jurors were glaring at Marcus openly. The defense tried to create doubt. They argued the recordings were taken out of context, that Marcus had been joking, that business practices weren't always clear-cut, but their arguments felt hollow against the weight of evidence. Wallace Thorne testified for the prosecution. He described meetings where Marcus had explicitly discussed fraud, how Marcus had directed him to create shell corporations and falsify documents, how Marcus had threatened anyone who questioned his decisions. Did you ever express concerns about the legality of these actions? The prosecutor asked. Yes, multiple times. And how did Mr. Vane respond? He told me I was being paid to solve problems, not create them. He said if I couldn't handle it, he'd find someone who could. Marcus's face remained impassive, but I could see the strain. His mask was cracking. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed out to file stories. Marcus's remaining family members, his mother, his sister, sat in stunned silence. Marcus himself just stared at the jury box, as if he couldn't comprehend what he'd heard. Sentencing was scheduled for a month later. Marcus faced up to 15 years in federal prison. I left the courtroom without waiting for reactions or statements. I'd gotten what I came for. Justice, accountability, proof that even golden children could fall. But I felt no triumph, just exhaustion. Clara was waiting outside. "How do you feel?" "Tired." "That's reasonable. He'll appeal. It'll drag on for years." "Maybe, but he's been convicted." "That doesn't change." We walked to a coffee shop nearby and sat in a back corner, away from the reporters and spectators. "Vane Capital is stable now," Clara said. "The new CEO is doing well. Clients are returning. The stock has recovered some value." "Good. So what will you do?" "I don't know. I never wanted to run a company. I just wanted to stop Marcus." "You did more than stop him. You saved 47 jobs. You rebuilt something broken. That counts for something, does it?" "Your grandfather thought so." I sipped my coffee thinking about the letter I'd found. Destroy or build? He'd given me the choice, and I'd chosen to build. But now, with Marcus convicted and the company stable, I felt unmoored. Revenge had given me purpose. What purpose did I have now? "You could sell your shares," Claire suggested. "Take the money, start over somewhere else." "And do what?" "Whatever you want. You're 32. You're financially secure. You have options most people never get." She was right. The trust's value, even diminished by Marcus's fraud, was substantial. I could sell my controlling interest, walk away with millions, and never think about Vane Capital again. But something held me back. That night, I drove to the cabin one more time. I'd been avoiding it since the trial started, but I needed the clarity it provided. The isolation, the distance from everything that had consumed the last 4 months. I sat in my grandfather's study and thought about what he'd written. What you could make it. He hadn't saved Vane Capital for Marcus. He'd saved it for me. Not because he thought I deserved it, but because he thought I could transform it into something better. I pulled out my laptop and started researching. Not financial records this time, but something different. I looked at companies that had rebuilt after scandals, businesses that had recovered from fraud and emerged stronger. I read case studies, articles, academic papers about organizational transformation. A pattern emerged. The companies that survived didn't just fix their problems. They changed their fundamental purpose. They became something new. I opened a blank document and started writing. By morning, I had a proposal. Not for restructuring Vane Capital, but for reimagining it entirely. The board meeting was scheduled for Monday. I spent the weekend refining my proposal, stress testing every assumption, building financial models. By Sunday night, I had a document that was either brilliant or insane. Clara read it and laughed. "Your grandfather would have loved this." "You think it's crazy. I think it's ambitious. There's a difference." Monday morning, I stood before the board again. Same conference room, same skeptical faces, but different energy. They'd seen me rebuild the company once. They were curious what I'd propose next. Vane Capital was founded as an investment firm, I began. For 70 years, we've managed money for wealthy clients, helped them get wealthier. It's been profitable and prestigious. It's also been elitist and exclusionary. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. I'm proposing we change that completely. I want to transform Vane Capital into a community investment fund. We'll still manage wealth, but we'll focus on local investments, small businesses, on affordable housing, economic development in underserved areas. We'll be profitable, but our success will be measured not just in returns, but in community impact. The room was silent. "That's not a restructuring," one board member said. "That's a completely different business model." "Yes, it'll alienate our current clients. Some of them, yes. But we'll attract new ones. People who want their money to do more than accumulate. Who want to invest in their communities. And if it fails, then I'll take responsibility. My controlling interest means I bear the risk. But I believe it can work. More than that, I believe it should work." Patricia spoke up. "This is a radical departure from everything Vane Capital has been." "Good. Everything Vane Capital has been led to Marcus, to fraud and corruption and exploitation. I don't want to restore what we were. I want to create something new." "And you think changing our investment focus will somehow redeem the Vane name?" "I think it's a start." The debate lasted 2 hours. Some board members were intrigued. Others thought I was naive. But in the end, my controlling interests meant they couldn't stop me. They could resign in protest, or they could help me try. 6 of the 9 chose to help. The transformation took a year. We rebranded, we restructured our investment portfolio. We partnered with community organizations and local governments. We funded an affordable housing project, a small business incubator, and a workforce development program. It was hard. We lost clients, wealthy individuals who didn't want their money wasted on social programs. We faced skepticism from the investment community. We struggled with the logistics of managing community-focused investments. But slowly, it worked. The affordable housing project housed 200 families. The business incubator launched 37 new companies. The workforce program trained 500 people for skilled jobs. And Vane Capital became profitable again. Not as profitable as it had been under Marcus, but sustainable, stable, meaningful. Marcus's sentencing happened in the middle of this transformation. He received 12 years in federal prison, no parole for at least 8 years. He'd be 53 when he got out. I didn't attend the sentencing. I was meeting with a nonprofit about a new investment partnership. But Clara went and called me afterward. He looked broken, she said, not angry anymore, just defeated. Good. He asked about you. What did he say? He wanted to know if you were happy, if destroying him had made you feel better. I thought about it. What did you tell him? That you were building something, that you'd moved on, that you didn't think about him anymore. It was mostly true. I thought about Marcus sometimes. How could I not? But he didn't consume me anymore. Revenge had given me purpose, but building something meaningful had given me satisfaction. How did he react? I asked. He laughed, not a good laugh, a bitter one. He said, "Of course he did. Of course Elliot found a way to make himself the hero." I hung up, feeling nothing. Marcus's opinion didn't matter anymore. The first-year anniversary of the gala came and went without fanfare. The press had moved on to new scandals. Vane Capital had become just another investment firm, notable only for its unusual focus on community impact. I kept my studio apartment. I still drove my old sedan. I still shopped at thrift stores and ate cheap meals. The trust's wealth could have bought me luxury, but I didn't want it. I'd seen what wealth and status had done to Marcus. I didn't want to become what he'd been. Instead, I worked. I learned about community development and affordable housing. I met with small business owners and nonprofit leaders. I used my accounting skills not to help rich people get richer, but to help struggling communities stabilize. It felt right in a way nothing else had. 2 years after the gala, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Marcus, mailed from federal prison. I almost threw it away without reading it. But curiosity won. The letter was handwritten, Marcus's usually perfect penmanship now shaky and uncertain. Elliot, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I understand now what I did to you, what I did to the company, what I did to myself. For years, I told myself I was special, that rules didn't apply to me, that I deserved everything I took because I was smarter, better, more deserving than everyone else. I believed it so completely that I couldn't see what I was becoming. You were always there, quiet and competent, doing the work nobody noticed. I dismissed you because acknowledging you would have meant acknowledging my own inadequacy. It was easier to call you worthless than to admit you were better than me at the things that mattered. I've had a lot of time to think in here. A lot of time to realize that every insult I threw at you was really about my own fear. Fear that I wasn't enough, that I didn't deserve what I had, that I was the worthless one. I heard about what you did with Vane Capital, the community investment focus, the affordable housing. I won't pretend I understand it or support it, but I'll admit it's more meaningful than anything I ever built. You proved grandfather right. You were the honest Vane, the one who could be trusted with his legacy. I was just the one who looked the part. I don't expect a response. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know that you won completely. Not just my freedom, but my certainty. You took everything, including my belief that I was right. I hope you're satisfied. Marcus. I read the letter 3 times, looking for manipulation or hidden agenda. But it read sincere, broken, bitter, but sincere. I didn't respond. What would I say? Marcus was serving his sentence. He'd lost everything. My grandfather's trap had worked perfectly, but reading his admission stirred something unexpected. Not satisfaction, but sadness. Marcus had been arrogant and cruel, but he'd also been family. We'd shared a grandfather, a legacy, a name, and I'd destroyed him, necessarily, justly, but still. I showed the letter to Clara. "How do you feel?" she asked. "I don't know. He's still trying to make it about him, and even in apologizing. But there's something genuine there, too. Do you regret what you did?" "No, he deserved what happened, but I wonder sometimes if there was another way. If I could have stopped him without the public humiliation, without the recordings at the gala. You could have gone quietly to the authorities. He would have fought it, used his connections, dragged it out for years. The public shame was necessary to make sure justice happened." "Then you have your answer." She was right. I'd made my choices and stood by them. Marcus was in prison because of what he'd done, not because of what I'd revealed. I'd just made sure everyone knew the truth. I filed the letter away and didn't think about it again. By year 3, Vane Capital's transformation was complete. We'd divested from most traditional investments and focused entirely on community development. We weren't the largest firm, but we were profitable and sustainable. More importantly, we mattered. The businesses we funded employed hundreds of people. The housing we financed sheltered thousands. The programs we supported trained and educated thousands more. I'd proven something my grandfather had believed, that Vane Capital could be a force for good, not just wealth accumulation. The board had stabilized too. 3 of the original members had resigned, unable to accept the new direction. We'd replaced them with community leaders and nonprofit executives who understood our mission. Patricia remained, my strongest ally on the board. She'd worked with my grandfather and understood what he'd intended. He knew Marcus was corrupt years before he died, she told me once. But he also knew that exposing him immediately would destroy the company and hurt innocent people. So he built his trap carefully, knowing you'd be the one to spring it. Why me? Because you were the only one he trusted, the only one who'd never asked him for anything, the only one who might care more about justice than wealth. I'm not sure I'm that noble. You don't have to be noble. You just have to be honest. That's all he wanted. My personal life remained simple. I dated occasionally, but nothing serious. I had friends now, people from the nonprofit sector, community organizers, people who cared about work that mattered. I still lived in my studio apartment, though I could afford better. The simplicity felt right. I didn't want Marcus's life of luxury and excess. I wanted something different, something honest.